In this episode of the Success Grid podcast, I have with me Selig to talk about being the author of your own story and thrive and how to create a healthier, happier, and more prosperous life. Rand is an accomplished entrepreneur, coach, scoutmaster, and board member with an MBA from Stanford and undergraduate degree in mathematics and psychology. He excels at managing complex projects globally. He is relentlessly positive and believes he can design his own life and he can help others do the same. Rand, welcome to this episode of the Success Secret podcast.
Thank you, Hussein, for having me as your guest.
Thank you for joining me. So first of all, Rand, because this is the Success Secret podcast and you are the author of your own story, as our listeners would be the authors of their own stories, what does success means to you, and what do you see other people have certain misconceptions around what success is?
It's a fantastic opening question, Hussein. I think a lot of people around the world struggle with that concept of what does success mean. And I firmly believe that defining success should be a very personal thing. And we shouldn't just buy into what the media and other people are saying, which largely means success is about financial things. I think it's much, much bigger than that. Of course, doing well financially is important, but you have to know your limits. You have to know when enough is enough, because success means having a number of things going on, including having strong, deep, and enduring relationships with others, having a great relationship with yourself, taking care of yourself physically and mentally, being a lifelong learner, being emotionally healthy, having gratitude. There's a whole complex of things that are involved. And I've met a lot of people, with my company. I've worked with a lot of really, really talented CEOs and founders, and I helped them sell their companies, and that added some more chips to their financial pile. But a lot of them were not successful. Why? Because all around them were failed relationships with partners or in their personal lives. They were not successful, in my view.
So do you think habits play a great role in us being successful and redefining what success is to us as humans?
Well, yes, I agree with that habits are important. But before you create a habit, and especially when you're doing something important like defining what's important for in your life, you have to do some deep thinking of who you are, what you stand for, what you won't stand for, what your values are, what your aspirations are, what your talents are. There are many, many important questions. What kind of personality do you have? And from there, then you can say, I'm good at this, I'm strong at this, I'm going to move forward with some continuing some good habits. And if you're not so strong in certain areas, but you'd like to be stronger now, you've got to work at that. Life is a process that benefits those people who are disciplined and willing to do the work.
So you mentioned like discovering ourselves, basically see what we stand for, what we don't stand for, what we accept, what don't we accept. Do you think that people generally, when we are speaking to ourselves in the mirror, are we that honest with ourselves?
Honesty. Well, of course, there's a range. Some people, one of the most powerful things we have in our lives is our ability to rationalize. And so you could look in that mirror and say, wow, I'm terrific. When in fact, the history, your record is not so great. You've messed up. You've not achieved that much. You've maybe been a bad person in certain ways and hurt some people along the way, and you've made a lot of mistakes. That's all possible. We've all made mistakes and so on. So the question of honesty is something that is a quality of toughness. You have to be able to say, okay, I'm honest that I am good but not great. And the reason why, what's the missing part is this. And now over the next cycle of time, I'm going to work harder at that. I'm committed to being the best person I can be. I'm going to be committed to be authentic and honest and a person of integrity, those kinds of things. And so a lot of people are not honest. Yes, I have to say that's true. And I think they suffer for that lack of honesty.
Mm. So to go from, like you mentioned, from being good to being great, we have to take certain steps in ourselves so that we can develop as humans and turn ourselves into our best self. Because eventually, but the issue is, like most of us, like you mentioned earlier, we generally go for, we want more money. We don't look at other aspects of life, being grateful or being have authenticity, being honest. These things that are actually human-driven features that only humans can have. So how does that affect us to be the best versions of ourselves? And of course, being the best version of ourselves does not come in a 24 hour day. It's basically a process, right?
Very much so. Very much so. Well, I think in my walk through life, I've met a lot of people who are very wealthy. This is, the world I live in, the investment banking world, a lot of very, very wealthy people. And that's allowed me to look closely at what they're about. And, the yardstick I use is my personal yardstick. And it could be different than the next person. It could be, and that's fine. I mean, that's what makes life interesting. But I have to say, a lot of these very wealthy people just don't know when enough is enough. And they don't do a lot with the talent and the resources that they've accumulated over time. Again, my judgment. And for a lot of people who have a lot of talent, I mean, they've risen up, they've had some great experiences, they've had a lot of responsibilities. What are they doing with that besides accumulating more? Are they on boards? Are they volunteering? Are they mentoring? What are they doing out in the world to make not only the world better, but in turn they become better people too? And the people who do that, who have amassed resources and great experiences, who then are generous with their time and their money, to me, they are much better people, and they're more interesting to be with. They're attractive people.
Hmm. So now, speaking of thriving in a world full of distractions, I guess, and we want as humans to design our life to be our best life and be our best self. Is there some kind of, let's say, maybe some kind of pointers or framework that each human should focus on and put these into paper and then try to implement them into action so they would know that they are progressing and having steps for it?
Well, I absolutely have to say emphatically yes to that. This is actually the genesis of why I wrote my book, Thriving. I realize that people have a huge amount of power, a power to make choices in their lives, choices about how they spend their time and who they spend their time with, and even their feelings, choices about feelings. And this power can be used in marvelous ways to get them on the pathway to reaching their potential, to thriving, to being happy, to being successful the way they choose to be successful and healthy and happy and prosperous. Those are pretty good things to have.
Hmm. So you mentioned time, which is very important thing. Actually, the only thing that we have here on earth that is we cannot get back. So if you had a choice, or not a choice, if you don't have a choice to do one thing that will positively impact your life in regards to time, what is that you would do?
I'll answer that by giving a little background. About 15 years ago, I woke up one morning and I said, wow, I am living a great life. What could make it better? And I very quickly realized to have deeper and more enduring relationships. So I went through my list of friends and I picked 6 people. They happen to be all males, although I have many female friends too. And I said, I am going to see if I can't have a deeper relationship with them. And then I figured out the thing I have to do is become more vulnerable. They probably saw me as a guy who didn't have any chinks in the armor. And so I said, okay, I need to talk to them and tell them stuff I'm worried about and maybe ask their advice. And I also realized of these 6 people, I didn't think anybody would say, oh, Rand's so weird, we're not going to be a friend of his anymore. But I did think that there was a possibility the needle would not move and that the relationship would not change. Well, I'm delighted to report it didn't take very long, a few months, but 5 out of 6 of those people became much better friends, deeper friends. They began telling me things that they were concerned about, stories I'd known them for years, stories I'd never heard from them before, and vice versa. And so to answer the current question, what would I do? I would do more of that. I would do more of that. Also, I last year came down with a what's commonly called an arthritic flare, affected my arms and my shoulders and my back, really painful. For the first time in my life, I was not sleeping well. So I decided I was going to really engage to not only get back to the shape I was before this arthritic flare, but even 5 years the way I was physically with strength and stability, 5, maybe even 10 years before. And so I've been undertaking that. And that's a time commitment every day, every day. I'm taking time with stretching and strength stuff and running, and it's dramatic, the improvement that it is. So I've accomplished that. I'm on the road to being this younger person because my body has responded so well to this extra attention, the extra investment I'm making.
Mm. You mentioned being like in your story there 15 years ago, you mentioned vulnerability with others. So being vulnerable, some people see it as a bad thing, but actually opened up the hearts of the people around you and yourself to tell more things or more stories, and that created, I would say, maybe more trust to
Yes.
share things, which is very important for us as humans. So this is very important thing to have.
Trust is a bedrock component in a high quality relationship. And I say the most important relationship we have in our lives is the one with ourselves. And I'm surprised when I come across people from time to time who do not trust themselves. So if you trust yourself, it'll help you to trust others, to accept them for who they are, to engage with them with more openness and more honesty, and to say, hey, look, it's not as if I'm a perfect human being. I don't know that person exists. I've not met them, but I'm okay with who I am, and I'm okay with continuing to look and work at becoming an even better person. It's
Yeah.
one of my purposes.
Yeah, trusting ourselves is very others is important, and trusting ourselves is also even more important because that will help us make better choices for ourselves. So because life is generally about choices A, B, C, Z, whatever. So that will make us more courageous. And I think the definition of a leader, and we should all be leaders of ourselves first, right? To have the courage and the trust in ourselves to make choices, and even if these choices were wrong, we may make these choices. So that's very important.
I'm so happy you brought up the concept of leadership. Leadership is something we do with ourselves, and it's something we do with others. There's 2 parts of that. And it's important also to distinguish between leadership and management. We use those terms interchangeably when in fact they're really very different things. Stephen Covey, the great Stephen Covey, wrote at one point, he said, management is operational efficiency in climbing the ladder to achievement. Leadership is making sure the ladder's on the right wall. And I think that's really important as we go back to your basic point. As leaders of ourselves, we have to know what we're doing, what we're attempting to do in our lives. And if you just abdicate, you just say, oh well, I'll just go with the flow, you may be heading in the wrong direction for yourself and your family and the people around you. The management of that process, again, is a different thing, and you need to manage yourself as well as lead yourself.
That's very important. Like having the ladder on the right wall is very important, because it's important to make choices. And when we make choices and take decisions and being the leader for ourselves, if we were mistaken for which wall it is, we can make another choice and remove or move the ladder to a different one. So, but we have to be courageous enough and trusty of ourselves enough to move on or take actions. That's very important in life. So I would say, so what in your experience or your business or seeing with others, talking to others, or your business with others, what was the worst advice that you have ever received?
The worst advice?
Yeah.
The worst advice. Oh, wow. I don't dwell on those kinds of questions. So let me think about that. I think some of the worst advice is all in this category of you can't do X. I remember as a little kid, I was not very physically strong. And I remember coming home and my mother said, oh, don't worry about it. You know, just because you keep coming in last in these races at school, don't worry, you're just not a good runner. And I listened to that. I accepted that voice from my mother, who I respected and who I think was trying to help me. And for years after that, I said, well, I'm not a good runner. I won't even try really to run. Well, then, actually, in my early 30s, I started running, and I became actually a very good runner. And I thought, I came home from a big run, about a 10-mile run, and I said to my wife, I'm an athlete. And I'd never thought about myself in that way before. When I was in college getting a degree in mathematics, I was a tutor, and people would come in to the tutoring, the math department, and say within like a sentence or two, I'm not good at math. So I would say to them, well, let's work on some problems together. And after a session or two, I'd say, well, why don't you try this one on your own? And after a while, they got good, got more confident, and they said, I like math, it's fun. So I think these self-limiting voices that we hear, we need to take a look and say, maybe that's not who I am now, and I'm not going to listen to those voices anymore.
So we need to be in a place of try, let's say, make a decision to not to listen to negative voices that are could be not affecting our life in a good way and having us grow as humans. We need to trust, like we go back to trusting ourselves and to move forward, which is very important, and making the choices. Now, making the choices could be right, could be wrong, but we need to trust ourselves for the process. And if we see something that is not working, we can go to different, let's say, path or choice. But we need to take control of our own thing in order for us to have a thriving life and to have what we actually thrive to achieve in our business or life. So that's very important. So Rand, is there something that is important that you would like to mention here that you think that we have missed talking about?
Well, I think one more thing. There are many things we could continue to talk about, but I just want to encourage your listeners to take the time, slow things down, take the time to reflect. You know, what's going on? What's going around on? What's going well? What's not going so well? Where are you happy? Where are you successful? Where are you achieving things and where not? And with that reflection, and maybe that means you're taking a walk by yourself. Maybe you're quietly out in nature. Wherever it works for you to do that self-reflection, it will pay big dividends. And then you can make more investment on what you discover about yourself. This is the pathway. It's part of the early stage, the pathway of getting on the road to thriving.
Yeah, definitely. You have to know who we are. We have to discover who we are before we actually try to discover other people and what they are and what they do and what are their intentions. It's important to focus on ourselves first and lead ourselves first. So, Rand, where can people learn more about you, get in touch with you, see your book, and get it?
Well, thank you. My book, Thriving, is available, of course, at Amazon, but also at the independent bookstores. You can also go to my website, my book website, randselig.com, randselig.com. There's a lot of interesting information. There's, if you give me your email address, you get quotes from my book, my favorite quotes by chapter. A lot of quotes in my book. I mentioned the Stephen Covey one. There are many others. And there are some podcasts. So I'll add yours, Hussein, when it becomes available, so people can listen to other conversations I've had on a variety of different topics from people really around the world. It's been a joy.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Rand Selig, for being with me on this episode of Success Great Podcast. You have an amazing perspective into things and life to thrive as humans, because we are here to help ourselves and thrive in our life, to also have an impact on others people's life. And we do that, first of all, impacting our own life first, and then we can move on to impacting other people's life. So thank you very much for joining me for this one of the Success Great Podcast.
Thank you again, Hussein. It's been a pleasure.